Is it possible that we are living in what could be considered a simulation? Well, I believe yes. Now, that doesn't mean that it isn't a highly complex simulation that is well more advanced than any that we could create here. But understanding this and how our reality actually operates gives us an edge when it comes to functioning in this reality, which in turn helps you to create reality within the quote-unquote simulation much more precisely. And this basically means more money for you, more freedom, and more of the experiences that you want to have. So in this video, we're going to be going over why it does appear like we are in some kind of incredibly advanced simulation, and how to start interacting with it in a way that allows you the time, financial, and location freedom that you may be after. And I think you're really going to like this because once you understand how this works, and you utilize the principles behind the simulation, not only can you work less to get more of what you want in your life, but it's actually very enjoyable to do so. Contrary to popular belief, you do not need to suffer in order to attract what it is in your life. In fact, doing that will give you the opposite effect. Now, we need to look at the old way in which most people have been taught to manifest or create their reality versus this new way that utilizes the simulation hypothesis and how to operate within the simulation to bring about more of what you want. Now, the old ways of doing things was based on the idea that reality is mainly physical, and this is simply known as materialism. So basically, this states that we live in a physical world in a physical universe. So if you want to create changes in your life, you have to go out and hustle and grind and essentially be this physical being that is manipulating the physical world around you. Yet, even if this does bring you some so-called rewards, it almost always comes with consequences. It almost always comes with some level of stress, burnout, health issues, and so much more. And it really seems that freedom actually becomes almost impossible when you go this route. You almost always become a slave to something. And the reason this way of going about manifestation or creating what you want in your life falls flat or comes with so many problems is because it actually goes against different universal principles and the flow of life that is going to be explained when we go over how the simulation theory works. Essentially, with this old way of going about things, you are fighting against life rather than working with it. Now, the way I am suggesting or inviting you to move instead is not the hustle and grind way. It is more of what we could call the co-creation or cooperative way that actually works with the principles that the simulation theory and other data supports. Now, to make this simple, the old way we can call by me, as in life happens by me. Just think of this as the hustle and grind. You are a physical being trying to influence the physical world, and that's basically the game. Now, this new way of moving is called through me, where it essentially is life happens through me. You are cooperating and co-creating with life, not moving against it. It's like the difference between trying to swim upstream in a raging river versus allowing yourself to move with the river, having all of that power at your back. When you're going with the flow of life, you get to harness the power of the flow. When you're fighting against the flow, you're having the full power of that flow now battling against you. So if we want to master our creation, if we want to have freedom in our lives financially, with our time, with location, or any other area you want freedom in, we need to start operating more from through me rather than this old paradigm of by me, which operates from the frame of materialism being base reality. And like I already mentioned, the great news here is when you start operating from through me based on what we're going to be going over with the simulation hypothesis, not only do things become easier, they also become more enjoyable. Because again, you have a life now helping you in the direction you want to go. Now, I don't want you to just take my word for it. So before we move on to how the simulation theory works, I want to show you a few of the results that my clients have gotten by moving from by me to through me. And I think you're going to be blown away by how different their lives are through applying this for only a few months.
Let me just say this shit's working, like, big time. I went from being on the back roads to the interstate. Everything's moving really, really fast. April was the most money I've ever made in my life. I made like $20,000 last month.
I mean, really within I think it was like within 2 or 3 weeks of starting to work with Dave. I had the company I work for now, basically they were like, "Hey, we want to offer." I went on an interview. It was very good connection, very good positive vibes with the people. I liked the people, and they were like, "Hey, we want to offer you. This is when you can start." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, it was just like a good situation, and I've been doing very well there now. I just love my life, so it's been good.
But I sold two of my biggest deals ever during this course, 1.25 million, and I attracted them effortlessly.
That there is a seamlessness and a holisticness in Maxit that is missing in other courses. Some courses, they don't hold accountability. Some courses teach you philosophy, but they don't teach you application. Other courses have no way for you to grow as a group and amplify the learning experience. Other courses don't create a level of accountability and responsibility and written documentation and create an infrastructure for you to actually do that, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel yourself, right? Those are things that are unique in the way Maxit has done that I have not seen in other courses. And I've gone through quite a few very famous courses, for lack of a better term.
Now, that being said, how do we know that our reality operates similar to a simulation and isn't this materialistic reality that we have, most of us at least, have been taught it is? Well, actually, the evidence has been there for quite some time. And we could even say that certain ancient civilizations and people were aware that our world is not mainly physical or based on materialism. They may have not had the comparison of a simulation, but they knew it wasn't a strictly physical world that we live in. Materialism itself starts to fall apart when we ask something like, well, where did this all come from? Most scientists will agree that there was some beginning point to our universe. Whether you call it the Big Bang or something else, most would be in agreement that there was an initial starting point. However, materialism has no answer to this idea of something from nothing. Basically, materialism asks us to give them a free miracle, and then they will explain the rest. However, if we look at the simulation perspective or simulation theory, everything actually fits into place perfectly. Because even in the simulations or games that we have created, every single one of them has a big bang or starting point from the perspective of the game or the simulation, starting from a zero state. You then switch it on, and then there's an influx of information and data, which again is similar to a big bang from the perspective of the game. Now, what I'm going to do is play you a quick clip from a documentary known as the Simulation Hypothesis that's going to explain this in a little more detail to give you a better understanding of what I'm talking about here.
From the materialist view that our universe is all there is, as an objective, independent reality, the fact that the Big Bang came from nothing is very hard to explain. How could everything come from nothing? But if you look at the universe as a virtual construct, the Big Bang model works perfectly. Virtual worlds always begin with an information influx from a zero state, since they need to initially boot up. Every time a computer game starts up, a Big Bang occurs from the perspective of the game. From inside the virtual world itself, the creation always comes from nothing, because before it boots up, there is no space or time as defined by the rules of that virtual world.
Now, another really interesting fact that I always blows my mind when I'm researching it or I come across it again is that physicist James Gates, while exploring reality and really trying to get to the fabric of what is reality made up of, discovered that at a very deep level, you can find computer code in our reality. Again, not in a game or simulation we have created, but in the reality that we are operating in ourselves. And again, don't take my word for it. Here is a clip of him giving a little bit of an explanation about that.
So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos?
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code, You're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code, it's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s.
So are you saying we're all just, there's some entity that programmed the universe and we're just expressions of their code?
Now, this might all sound a little bit bizarre if you've never come across this before. You might ask, well, if I was in a simulation or game, wouldn't I be aware that I'm in a simulation or game? You know, I see other simulations and games and it's quite obvious, so wouldn't I just know and wake up one day and go, oh, look, I'm in a game, I'm in a simulation? Wouldn't there be more signs in my everyday life that I'm in a game rather than what I think is, you know, some other kind of reality? Well, I wouldn't be too quick to think that. If you knew you were in a game or a simulation and there was, say, a purpose to this game or simulation, it would kind of remove or just make that purpose obsolete. And there are many different ideas on what the point of the game is or the simulation or whatever else. I certainly have my own that I align to, but I would suggest to you that there's a reason that you are here in this so-called game or simulation. However, again, I'm going to hand it over now to someone who is a little more versed in this, who is a physicist, who explains this a little bit better, about how you wouldn't really recognize that you were in a simulation or game necessarily if you were in one. So let's do that right now.
If I were a character in a computer game that were so advanced that I were actually conscious and I started exploring my video game world, it would actually feel to me like it was made of real solid objects, made of physical stuff. Yet if I started studying, as the curious physicist that I am, the properties of this stuff, the equations by which things move and the equations that give the stuff its properties, I would discover eventually that all these properties were mathematical. The mathematical properties that the programmer had actually put into the software that describes everything.
The server that's creating you is not in your reality frame. It's outside. If you're Sims, that computer is non-physical to you. What's physical to you is your Sims world.
Okay, so you just heard Max Tegmark talk about how all of these properties within the game are mathematical. They're finely tuned and precise and mathematical. And this is actually the case with our reality as well, which also gives more credence to the idea that it is similar, at least, to a simulation or a game. But this is really good news, because if there are fine-tuned, precise laws and principles to our reality, that means if we learn what these principles and laws are and interact with them in a very specific way, it means in a mathematically fine-tuned way, it would lead to actually some very predictable results one way or another. And that is exactly what begins to happen. And so now we're going to cover what some of the laws are of this game and simulation that are going to allow you to create reality. In fact, whether you know it or not, you have already been adhering to these. You have already been utilizing these, most likely unconsciously, because you've been creating since the moment you got here. The difference now is you can do it with more intention, which means you can create in the direction you actually want, rather than having what seems like random things that are usually more negative for most people come into your life. Now, going back to what I said towards the beginning, a lot of the reason why most people struggle to create what they want in their life is because they are trying to just do it through the physical world. They are physically trying to bend the physical world. However, if this is a simulation or a game, as I'm suggesting and as I've given some examples of, then there would have to be something or someone or a power that created, fine-tuned, programmed the game. And what if we could tap more into that power, that which has created the game, or this physical experience that we're going through, in order to alter the game? Well, here's the secret. You absolutely can do this, and again, whether you know it or not, you've already been doing it. And again, that difference between knowing this to be the case and being ignorant to it or not knowing is massively impactful in your life. Because once you know, you can suddenly start to create what you actually want, rather than having more of what you don't want, which again is most people's experience. One way I can explain this, it's like the difference between knowing the rules to the road, so as you're driving, versus not knowing the rules to the road. You see, if you didn't know the rules to the road and you tried to drive somewhere, and let's say most people were like that, it would be absolute chaos. You would never get to where you want to go. You'd take a left when you want to go right. You wouldn't know what the lines meant, the signs, the traffic lights. You would have no luck and no chance at all to go in the direction you wanted to go. And this is how most people are living and creating when it comes to their reality. They don't have the real rules to the game. They've been given a set of rules that don't actually work, which is called, in this case, materialism. However, when you do have the real rules to the road, or the actual rules to the game, well, suddenly you know what the signs mean. Suddenly you know what the lights mean. Suddenly you know how to get to the next level or the place you're trying to go, because you actually know how things operate. Another way I can describe this is if you're Mario in Super Mario World or whatever else, but you don't know how to play the game, well, you're never leaving level 1. If you don't know that you're supposed to jump on the turtles and hit the blocks and get the power-ups and whatever else, you're never going to progress in the game or simulation in this case. However, once you learn, oh, I can do this, I can move this way, I can jump, well, I can jump pretty high, I can become bigger, I can throw these things, I can jump over these crevices, I can even power up in the game, well, suddenly you're going to be past level 1 in a breeze. But if you're not aware of that, and you're Mario in the game who's unaware of this fact, you will never, ever progress to level 2 and move up in the game. So the first law with this game that's so crucial to understand is this one right here, which is the outer world, and this just means the physical world like we're talking about, follows the inner world. Now, what is the inner world? This is the part of you that connects to that power we're talking about beyond the game itself. It connects to that which that created the game, not the game itself. Again, we have the physical part of ourselves that interacts in the game through our 5 senses in the physical world. But we have something deeper than that that connects beyond the game, and again, into the energy power, whatever we want to call it, that actually created it, where the game actually came from. One way you can think about it is we have a game and we have a computer. The computer exists as the non-physical. It is what is needed for the game to operate. It is what, in this case, has created the game. And if we can tune into that more, then we can suddenly influence the game from outside the game more, rather than trying to be in the game changing things that are already here. Here's another way that you can think about it. You have a character that's in the simulation or the game. That character is how you're showing up now. My character's name is Dave, he does this, he looks this way, etc., etc. However, that's not who I am or what I am at the deepest level. That's just my avatar in the game and how I show up in the game. However, you have what is also known as the player, or the one that is outside the game operating the character. But if you think you're just the character and you're getting sucked into the game or physical world, often never tuning into that player, you're going to try and influence your life just through the physical, or believe this is all that there is and nothing can change or whatever else, because you're just looking at it from the perspective of being in the game as the character. However, if we can connect to the player that is outside the game, that is beyond the physical, in the non-physical, well then suddenly from that place we can start to influence what even shows up in the game. We can program cheat codes, so to speak, in the game. We can reprogram certain things in the game so different things show up, rather than trying to change what's already here. Now, what is the player actually? It is based on your consciousness. So you can think of it like the player is your consciousness. When you're in a higher level of consciousness, that player is able to influence the game more effectively and have different things show up for your character. It also helps you remember that you're not just the character, which is very, very useful. But when it's at a lower level of consciousness, it does the opposite, right? It influences the game in ways you probably don't want. You're unconscious a lot, and most people who are at the lower levels of consciousness are not aware that they have this other side of themselves. The side of themselves that's connected to that inner world place or beyond the physical. So again, when we say inner world, if we were going to make it very simple, it equals consciousness. So if someone is in a more fear-based consciousness, guilt-based consciousness, anger-based, pride-based, that is what's going to get programmed from the player into their game. But it works the other way around too. If that person is more courageously based, if that person is more love-based, more appreciative or gratefully based, if that person is more joyfully based, kind, all these things, that's what's going to be programmed into the game instead. Essentially, what you are doing inwardly from a level of consciousness is what's going to start showing up or having effects in your game. One way I love to think about it that I was told is you can think of the game or your physical world, remember that's what we're talking about here, as a consciousness history, or said in a way that sounds better, an energetic history. It is simply the accumulation of the levels of consciousness you have been dwelling in for a period of time, or what you have been dwelling in energetically over time. It is an accumulation of where your consciousness has been expressed inwardly, now showing up in your world. Now, one thing that's important to recognize here, because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second, I've been this way and it's not showing up in my life, or I've been this way or it's not showing up in my life. Well, we're going to get into another principle that goes over why that is the case. But first, understand if you want a different type of game, if you want different things in your physical world, you need to connect to the player more and shift your consciousness into a higher place. One thing I tell my clients all the time is when you're getting sucked into the character, meaning you're connecting to your physical world thinking that's all there is, you need to connect back to your player. Now, another name for the player is one that some people are familiar with. You could just call it your higher self. That is another name that's used, and it's relevant to what we're talking about here. In those moments when you connect to the higher self, higher because it's able to access these different parts of yourself, these planes beyond just the physical, again, into the non-physical. When you're connecting to that more often, you're able to influence your game more. Now, how can we start to do this? One of the easiest ways is to tune out of the physical more often. A lot of people get so immersed in it, so immersed in the game, again, they think that's all there is. They forget that it is simply a game. This even happens if you have ever played around with VR. A lot of people will experience, they put on the helmet or they're kind of immersed in this game and they forget that they have a VR helmet on. It feels so real. You can think of this reality in the same way, except it's 10 times even more real feeling than anything you're going to put on within the game. So in a sense, we need to take off the VR headset more and more and more. And again, there's many ways to do this. This is why meditation, visualization, and practices such as this are so valuable, because it takes your attention off the physical and brings it into that inner space that is the non-physical. This creates a stronger direct line to your player or higher self, which again is what can influence the game. Now, towards the end of the video, I will link you to one where I go over a visualization technique that will help you do this. In fact, that video is going to help you do many of the things that I go over in this video. I'm going to suggest something else. It's also going to help with that. So if you want some actual practices to do that are incredibly powerful at helping you tune into the player, I will give you that as a resource. So again, as you're going throughout your day, when you notice you're getting sucked into the character, again, you're just getting super immersed in the physical, you want to take a step back and connect to the player. Just getting present in the moment will help you to do this as well. Just really getting into the moment, breathing, anchoring yourself in the here and now, rather than getting immersed in everything that's around you, all the past, all the future, and everything else. So the next principle that I want you to understand on how this reality operates is the power of your attention and observations. There is actually a principle in science known as the observer effect that shows how powerful your attention and what you observe actually is. In fact, you can actually think of it this way: you are creating your reality one observation at a time. And what this really is what you are giving your attention to. Again, if you're engaging in low conscious activity, thoughts and feelings, that's where your attention is and that's where it's being anchored. That's where you're dwelling. But the opposite is true as well. If you're doing higher conscious activities, engaging in those kind of thoughts and just anchoring yourself there, that's where your attention is. Now keep in mind that observation is not only limited to the physical. What are you observing in the inner world? What are you thinking about? How are you feeling? What energy are you dwelling upon? Remember, the physical is simply a byproduct of the non-physical. The outer world follows the inner world. So where do you want to make sure your attention is especially disciplined? That's right, the inner world, those thoughts and those feelings. This is what makes up, or is a lot of what makes up, the non-physical aspect of you, which again is creating the physical. There is a reason quotes such as "you get what you think about" most of the time are so true and so powerful. Because that is then what you are observing and giving your attention to in the inner world that the outer world is responding to. And seriously, what you are observing, what you are giving your attention to, dwelling upon inwardly through your thoughts and your feelings, or we could call it emotion, which is energy in motion, is creating the biggest impact in what you are creating in your physical life. You can actually think of these two aspects of yourself as what's programming the game. You'll never find someone that is operating inwardly at a very low conscious place, thinking poor thoughts, feeling in very low emotions, who's then living a fulfilling life. And vice versa, you will struggle or never find someone who is in very elevated thoughts and in very elevated feel-good emotions all the time, who's not living a life that they enjoy. Now, to help you with this and give you a very practical exercise, along with a few other practices that are going to help you to start actualizing this right now, I go watch this video next where I go over one of the best visualization methods that I know of. In fact, this is one we give our clients that is going to help you to do this, to connect to the player, to connect that inner space so that you can start creating what you actually want in your physical life.